we're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite video game series turned TV show. I had high hopes for this show. Even when everyone else had nothing but negative things to say, I still held out hope. The previews didn't exactly wow me, but it did seem like stupid chaotic fun, which, in a lot of ways, is what I looked forward to in the original games. I mean, it clearly wasn't the Twisted Metal I know, but Twisted Metal is constantly changing. I love almost all of the Twisted Metal games, no matter how drastically different the design was from one to the other. So this could still be a valid version of that, right? Well, the game's story consists of a tournament of murderous bumper cars, with a bunch of different competitors offing each other for a chance at anything their heart desires. There is no such tournament here, meaning that there is literally no Twisted Metal in Twisted Metal. This is much more of a wasteland type feel, which honestly I think would work well for the world of Twisted Metal. I mean, for the most part, they didn't really speak too much of the world outside of Twisted Metal, except in players' end stories. But it's definitely an atmosphere that I think makes sense for the reckless violence and consequenceless chaos that the games provide. I like it conceptually, but in execution it kinda comes off like Mad Max Light. The one thing they got right in this is the cast. Not to say that they cast the right actors in the right parts, but they did bring together a team of talented actors with fairly familiar faces, which was a major selling point for me on the show. Yeah, Falcon, Lego Batman, Senior Joe, the Sandman, Sidney Prescott, that chick from SNL, and the guy I see in things that I can never remember his name. It's a list of who's who and who's been in what. I can legitimately say that I'm a fan of just about everybody that I knew on the cast. And while I recognize a lot of the cast, what I don't recognize is the characters that they're playing. The vast majority of alleged Twisted Metal characters in this alleged Twisted Metal show look and act nothing like the characters that they're supposed to be portraying. They just so happen to share a name. Most of the characters this iteration incorporates are some of the more obscure and forgotten Twisted Metal characters. Outside of Sweet Tooth and a very late almost appearance from Calypso, there's next to none of the franchise's iconic names and faces. The series' lead, John Doe, was only in Twisted Metal Black. Raven, one of the show's pretend protagonists, who's actually one of the main antagonists, was also only in Twisted Metal Black. John's ex-girlfriend in this, Bloody Mary, was also only in Twisted Metal Black. Mike and Stu, who were supporting characters throughout the show, were only in Twisted Metal 2. Agent Shepard and Miranda Watts were only in Twisted Metal Head On. Amber was only in Twisted Metal 3, Pizza Boy and Petunia were only in Twisted Metal 4, and Pit Viper was only in Twisted Metal 1. That's without me talking about all the cars that they show. These are all one and done for the video game franchise. To be fair, attendance doesn't necessarily equate to greatness, but a lot of these characters struggle to make an impression on fans of the franchise. The choices and characters feel incredibly random, as if they just put every contestant's name in a hat, shook it up, and then just started pulling out names and assigning roles to them. Even when a character you know makes an appearance, they aren't at all how you knew them. They don't look, act, or in any way resemble the characters that they're supposed to be based on. As previously stated, the main character is John Doe, who, like in the games, is an amnesiac. Unlike in the games, everything else. In this, John Doe is a milkman, which essentially just means he's a transporter. They carry unknown cargo across the wastelands and do their best trying not to get robbed or killed or both. That is a job title that is exclusive to this show. He's sarcastic, quick-thinking, stubborn, but otherwise is almost entirely nondescript. In the games, I suppose his characterization is similarly vague due to the absence of an origin and knowledge of his identity, but his personality is quite different. Twisted Metal Black's John Doe is a bit of a jerk. He's rough around the edges, he's stoic, he doesn't have time for jokes. Eventually in the game, it's revealed that he was an undercover agent infiltrating a radical racist chaos cult. He was essentially posing as a skinhead. That is very obviously not the same character we're dealing with in the Peacock show for pretty obvious reasons. The antagonist of the show is Agent Stone, a character who has previously been depicted in a fairly heroic light, all things considered. But here he's public enemy number 1, the big bad of this non-Twisted Metal tournament. Much like the character from the games, this one is also a police officer like his father and his father's father before him. Unlike the one from the games, everything else. Before the fall of civilization, Stone was your run-of-the-mill mall cop. constantly disrespected and clowned on by the general public, feeling like a failure in comparison to his family's legacy in law enforcement. But when the world as we know it ended, he redefined himself with force. With no one else upholding the law, he became the law. Thomas Hayden Church is doing a good job at bringing this character to life. He is ultimately unlikable. There's always an abundance of patrolmen, federal agents, and just overall people with badges of some kind in these games, all without ever having any correlation to each other. They existed separately, so I appreciate them placing them all together. Though again, most of these characters are showcased as being on the opposing side of the moral spectrum. Serving as Agent Stone's drones are the Roberts twins. I think having these two as total tools feels on brand for them. They were always kind of clowns masquerading around as good cops. Also serving underneath Agent Stone is Agent Shepard, originally depicted as an FBI agent looking to take down Calypso and end his tournament of terror. Here, he's not nearly all that heroic. As a matter of fact, he's shown to be a sleazy scumbag with no redeemable qualities. The worst type of person. Outside of having a similar hairstyle, there's nothing to compare. Although where this gets strange though for me is choosing to bring in Mike and Stu as the funny cops. These characters were definitely not the type of characters you'd ever trust with a badge, let alone a gun. In the games, Mike and Stu were a bunch of goofy stoners, who literally only enter the contest to gain the ability to fly. In this, they're stupid cops who butt heads and argue most of the time. These guys were the comedic relief of the second game, and now they're being put into the setting as supporting characters, with Stu feeling like he's constantly being shamed for his weight. Which, by the way, the original Stu was not at all overweight in the game. Equally pretty egregious is what they did to Bloody Mary. Now, this is just one of those inclusions that I don't necessarily hate, I just hate that she's supposed to be the character that she's supposed to be. Bloody Mary in Twisted Metal Black is a woman in love with the idea of being in love, willing to marry just about any man willing to marry her. All the proof her worth. Here, she's just another milkman that just so happens to be John Doe's psychotic ex. So she goes from being an actual dark and interesting character to being the main character's one-note psycho ex-girlfriend. It's a little unfortunate and a bit tropey, but I will say that I like the actress in the part. Miranda Watts and Amber Rose are put into a relationship, when their characters have never previously interacted before. They're from entirely different games, meaning they're from entirely different timelines and continuities. That's not a complaint, that's just an assessment. Because I really don't hate what they did with them. These characters, for the most part, were blank slates. They were never fully fleshed out or defined. And I don't think either character has ever been anybody's favorite. But that also makes me just question their inclusion at all. There were so many beloved characters that could fill these roles, and instead, you chose ones that nobody knows about and nobody cares. Even more puzzling is that while Amber's whole backstory was just, I like flowers, Miranda Watts is actually a legacy character. Her twin sister Amanda competed in the tournament and won, but Calypso went full genie and turned her reward into a punishment, having her sister compete in the tournament following to try to save— wait a second, that was the other twin story. They did the same exact thing twice? Why have I never noticed that? Okay, you know, maybe I take back what I said. Maybe it's better that they make some alterations. Highly important to the story being told is Raven, played by Neve Campbell. Now in the game, she's a goth teenager who is horribly bullied by a bunch of jocks who murdered her girlfriend. She takes part in the tournament to try to get revenge on those who killed her other half. But here, she's just some big boss. She's an evil COO manipulating others and using them as pawns in her schemes. Or, more accurately, in Calypso's. Yeah, that's not the same character. They share nothing in common outside their name and pendant. I would say that this is the worst and weirdest out of all the awful adaptations, but in actuality, the next one is. This one makes me the maddest out of all of them. Preacher. Preacher is the complete antithesis of what the character is meant to be. In the games, Preacher is a Bible thumper, a holier-than-thou madman who lives and dies by the Word of God, or what he believes is the Word of God. He follows the book, but believes he's punishing sinners and saving himself by competing, redeeming himself for his, well, let's be nice and say bad deeds. But Peacock's Preacher lives in immorality and basks in the life that he's living. He's a cult leader slash frat boy, teaching and commanding his minions to live in absolute debauchery and douchebaggery. The polar opposite of what should have been. Honestly, seeing him like this, it just feels blasphemous. The best part of this show has to be Sweet Tooth. It's not exactly a faithful adaptation, but it does feel like enough effort was actually put into this portrayal. The part is played by two actors. Professional wrestler Samoa Joe plays the part physically, while Will Arnett provides the voice. And these two did an incredible job together. Joe is on point with pantomiming Arnett's performance. It never feels disjointed. The role is very well acted. I guess it's more than fitting that the most entertaining part of the series is the clown. The show showcases the killer jester as a tried and true showman, doing all that he does for the admiration of others. This has never been a part of Sweet Tooth before, but I think it's fairly fitting for this Sweet Tooth. It's an interesting addition that works in favor of the show's narrative. Without a doubt, he is the most fun. They really made the extra steps to make references to the character's previous iterations, quoting his famous lines,
"If you're not gonna tell the truth, then I'm gonna make you shut up and bleed."
Please, no, I got a family.
Shut up and bleed, you motherfucker.
giving him Crazy Harold the Wacky Lunch Sack. That's a nice callback. It's definitely one of the sillier depictions of the Deviant. It deviates away from the source, but I'll be honest, it does genuinely feel like an actual iteration of Sweet Tooth. The cameos are completely chaotic. Pizza Boy looks like himself, but there's not really a whole lot of acting for him to do as he's seen and not heard. But the fact that he was even included is insane. Mr. Slam was the name of a truck in the games, but in this, he's a barkeep who gets his name from something that will get me demonetized. Dollface shows up at the end of the show, and I don't hate it. Dollface is actually one of my all-time favorite Twisted Metal characters. In terms of depiction, we don't see the character long enough for me to actually have an opinion on her, but her backstory is completely different from any Dollface that's come before. Calypso is also a miss for me. He's not a character per se, he's a presence. All throughout, his name is graffitied everywhere. Calypso is real.
Is he though?
This is part 1 of a 2-part review. In the meantime, if you like this video and would be interested in seeing the follow-up, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Don't get it twisted.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.